Hello, my name's Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about Threads, the 1984 BBC drama, which shocked people when it was shown originally and indeed continues to shock people today. Now, I must admit I hadn't heard of this film till relatively recently, so I was looking forward to watching it. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and it is an incredibly powerful film. The story is about nuclear war and the aftermath of nuclear war. And I guess at the time in the 80s, whilst the kind of tensions were still high between the Soviet Union and the United States, although perhaps it had lessened since the 60s and 70s. But nevertheless, there was this, this sense of perhaps fear that the world could be destroyed quite easily if someone just presses that button and sets off a nuclear bomb. And Threads actually expresses that idea to the full, and that actually happens. The film's really in three parts. We begin with a couple in Sheffield, in the north of England. Sheffield being an industrial town, of course famous for its steelworks. But also at the time, of course, in the 1980s, the industry was in decline, people were losing their jobs. And the film as a whole has this rather gritty, very realistic edge, which I think really gives the film its power, actually. It's not on a big budget, you can tell that, but everything about it has this kind of grittiness, this kind of dirt in the film, even before the nuclear attack happens. And incidentally, it's written by Barry Hines, who of course wrote Kes, which you might know, which has got a similar feel to that, and it's directed by Mick Jackson. So Threads, we have this couple in the first part, Jimmy and Ruth, and it turns out that Ruth is pregnant. It's an unplanned pregnancy, and they decide to have this baby, and they decide to get married. And but while this is happening, the international scene is ramping up, and there's more and more tension focused around Iran and the oil fields there, and eventually an ultimatum is issued by the USA to the Soviet Union in response to an attack to US forces in that area, which the Soviet Union doesn't honour. And then that brings us to the second part of the film, where in the midst of this ramping up of tension, and by the way, the local councillors are locked up underneath the town hall preparing for this eventuality, but no one really thinks it's going to happen. Everyone carries on, they're panic buying, etc. They're a bit worried, they're anxious, possibly a bit like the COVID panic recently, but but no one really thinks anything's going to happen. But then, of course, it does, and the attack happens, and unforgettably in the second part of the film, right at the beginning of the second part of the film, you hear the siren coming underneath the town hall, and they don't believe it first, but then of course they realise it is. And then we have this unforgettable attack on the city of Sheffield with these mushroom clouds, this dazzling light, children crying, chaos in the streets, a woman even urinates herself. It's just sheer terror, and it's absolutely terrifying to watch because it is so realistic. Because there's no kind of fancy effects, it just seems like the people you see on the streets, particularly if you live in Britain, just suddenly going bananas in a high street. It's really terrifying. And then you get the full force of the horror of what's happened, these firestorms, these people with horrific burns, people just in utter shock at what's happened. There's an unforgettable scene of Jimmy's younger brother kind of sitting, rocking in this aviary where his bird's just bawling his eyes out. It's such a sad, desperate scene, and he loses his life as well. There's no hope in this film. It's just completely bleak, and all the better for it as well. Jimmy and Ruth are separated in this attack. Ruth is pregnant, of course, and we don't see Jimmy anymore. We presume he's dead. And interspersed with the action from the beginning of this film, we have these voiceovers describing what's happened in economic, demographic, environmental terms. It's quite a powerful way of showing, of keeping the story going, and keeping it grounded in fact and realism. In the last part of the film, we really follow Ruth as she desperately tries to survive and look after her unborn child. And the looting starts, the serious effects of radiation start. People seem to go out their minds. There's some haunting scenes there's a lady cradling a dead baby. There's a man just playing with Star Wars figures because he doesn't know what else to do. It's just a scene of absolute hell, really. And Ruth is wandering through this, doing what she can to survive, find a roof, and eventually she gives birth in this rather twisted version of a nativity scene. On Christmas Day, she's in this stable with these starving people in front of a fire. It's a really desperate situation. And soon after she gives birth. And then her child grows up, and it turns out that the children, as you'd expect, are affected by the radiation, and they're rather they have trouble speaking and communicating. They look almost feral as they are going around the ruins of the north of England. And Ruth's daughter she's raped actually, and she becomes pregnant herself. And we come to the shocking end of the film where she gives birth. Threads is such an unforgettable experience, and it's just got so many important themes in it, like of course, more than anything else, the sheer terror, stupidity, and annihilation of nuclear weapons. There's also a commentary on the suspicion between different ideologies. Of course, of course, this is during the end of the Cold War. There's a lot about pregnancy and birth, but not birth in the sense of a new birth in hope for the future, but a kind of stillbirth where there's nothing to look forward to. Everything's so bleak and desperate. It's a bleak, disheartening film, but it's also an excellent film. And I would recommend anybody who hasn't watched this to go and find a copy. I found mine on Amazon, and just watch it, because it really is an incredibly important film. Thank you for watching. I've just included a brief slideshow of themes and the structure as well. Thanks.